Welcome back to part 2 of the Duggar Iceberg Explained. Once again, I just want to have a short disclaimer here that this video will be covering topics of an extremely sensitive nature, including homophobia, transphobia, spiritual abuse, and sexual abuse. So if any of those topics make you feel uncomfortable, remind you of unpleasant memories, if they bring you to a place that you don't want to go today, skip the video. There is nothing on YouTube that is worth your mental health. Let's get right into the iceberg, and we're going to be starting today with the ministry of Jeremy Vuolo. Ginger was once thought of as the most rebellious or independent of the Duggar daughters. She was famous for sometimes rolling her eyes when she was still living with her parents, and she married a man named Jeremy Vuolo. Jeremy Vuolo is slightly more liberal than his in-laws, but not by a whole lot. And he has said some offensive things during his time as a pastor. I will have a link down below if you want to watch longer versions of his sermons and get a better flavor for the kind of things that this man is saying. And now some words of wisdom from Ginger Duggar's pro soccer player turned pastor husband, Jeremy Vuolo. On feminism and race.
We deny that the postmodern ideologies derived from intersectionality, radical feminism, and critical race theory are consistent with biblical teaching.
On sexism.
We affirm that God has designed men and women with distinct traits and to fulfill distinct roles. These differences are most clearly defined in marriage and the church, but are not irrelevant in other spheres of life. In marriage, the husband is to lead, love, and safeguard his wife, and the wife is to respect and be submissive to her husband in all things lawful.
On sexuality.
The curse of sin results in sinful, disordered affections that manifest in some people as same-sex attraction. Salvation grants sanctifying power to renounce such dishonorable affections as sinful and to mortify them by the Spirit. We further affirm that God's design for marriage is that one woman and one man live in a one flesh, covenantal, sexual relationship until separated by death.
On transgender children.
The parents have no discipline over the child and no instruction over what's right and wrong. Just, whatever you feel, you do. And now you got a child who's barely come to cognitive understanding of the world, determining that how they were created is wrong and they're going to redo that. And we see that all over the place.
On Catholicism.
There are spiritual strongholds in our world today, aren't there? Just as Paul and Silas encountered the demonic in Philippi, so we encounter that here in Laredo. In this city we have the pagan religion of Catholicism gripping the souls of the majority.
Inspirational stuff. I think you can see, A, why the Duggars thought he would be a good husband for Ginger, and also B, why he's not the most popular person in the fandom. Derick Dillard was the first man to marry one of the Duggar daughters, Jill, the third oldest of the 19 children. Jill was only the second of the Duggar children to marry. While he is the most outspoken against his in-laws, especially father-in-law Jim Bob and brother-in-law Josh, Derick holds many intolerant and problematic views of his own. In August of 2017, when he and his wife Jill were starring on TLC's show Counting On, Derick idiotically took to Twitter to express some bigoted views on a fellow TLC star named Jazz Jennings. Jazz, then only 16, starred with her family in a show that explored her life as a trans woman. Derick repeatedly misgendered Jazz in a series of tweets that were heavily criticized by fans.
What an oxymoron, a reality show which follows a non-reality. Transgender is a myth. Gender is not fluid, it's ordained by God. I pity Jez, for those who take advantage of him in order to promote their agenda, including the parents who allow these kinds of decisions to be made by a child. It's said that people would use a juvenile this way. Again, nothing against him, just unfortunate what's on TV these days. Never bullied anyone, just said I didn't agree with what is being propagated on TV. I'm expressing my view of what should be treated as reality. If I say I feel like I am Nepali, that doesn't make me so. Also, has anyone looked into whether a child is capable of making that kind of decision? We can't vote till we're 18, our brains aren't fully developed till around 25. I want to be clear. I have nothing against him.
Bruh.
I only have issue with the words and definitions being propagated here. Jez is being taken advantage of, as part of a larger agenda. I really have nothing against the kid and wish him all the best in life. I just hate seeing him used this way.
Jesus Christ! Dude!
TLC's lackluster response was to release a brief statement saying, Derick Dillard's personal statement does not represent the views of TLC. Lame. Counting On would later be cancelled, but for very different reasons that we will discuss at the end of this video. You might think it can't get any dumber than the two son-in-laws you just heard about from the Duggar clan, but I assure you it actually can, because I think Jessa managed to marry the dumbest one of all when she married Ben Seewald. We did talk about them a little bit earlier in part 1 when we talked about their wedding, possible hanky-panky in the closet, but now let's talk about a couple things that are a little bit darker about these two individuals. You might think I'm being a little bit mean when I say that Ben Seewald is not the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree, but after you hear a couple of things he has to say about science, evolution, other issues like abortion, you may have a different point of view. Jessa and Ben have been photographed at the Ark Encounter, which is in Kentucky. It is a museum dedicated to the idea of creationism, the Christian idea that the earth is 6,000 years old, that Noah's Ark is literally true, that dinosaurs and humans lived on the earth at the same time and were both on the ark, and a whole lot of other insane batshit things that I will be getting to in another video. I'm coming for you, Ken Ham. Anyway, Jessa famously was extremely excited about when this museum was opening. She has been photographed there with her husband, and some of those beliefs seem to have seeped into her belief system as well. Here's a quote from Ben Seawald, who is going to be enlightening us on how evolution is in fact at fault for racism. I apologize ahead of time if you lose any brain cells.
There's been a lot of, tension in America between, blacks and whites, and in the media, too. There's been all these reports and, race war and, going on and everything, and these killings and people saying, hey, we're trying to start a race war? That all comes from the devil. That all comes from, this false religion out here, evolution, that stuff. Teaching that, some people are more evolved.
If you managed to take anything legible away from that, I have to give you some kudos. That was extremely hard to understand. But I think what Ben is trying to get at is that because some beings are more evolved, which no, they're not. The thing about evolution is that everything that's living now has evolved for the same amount of time, right? Since we all have a common ancestor. Basically, he's completely wrong about that. If you thought that was bad, just wait until wife Jessa takes Ben's brilliant ideas and brings them to the next level. Jessa famously went to the Holocaust Museum, and instead of just equating evolution to racism, she took it a step further and equated the Holocaust to abortion. Go ahead and listen to this brilliant post by Jessa Duggar Seawald.
Millions of innocents denied the most basic and fundamental of all rights, their right to life. One human destroying the life of another deemed less than human. Racism, stemming from the evolutionary idea that man came from something less than human, that some people groups are more evolved and others less evolved. A denying that our Creator God made us human from the beginning. All of one blood and one race, descendants of Adam. The belief that some human beings are not fit to live. So they're murdered. Slaughtered. Kids with Down syndrome or other disabilities. The sickly. The elderly. The sanctity of human life varies not in sickness or health, poverty or wealth, elderly or preborn, little or lots of melanin making you darker or lighter skinned, or any other factor. May we never sit idly by and allow such an atrocity to happen again. Not this generation. We must be a voice for those who cannot speak up for themselves. Because every life is precious. #pro-life
I apologize now in case you have no brain cells left, but if you do have a few left, let's get rid of the rest of them. Take a look at this image that Ben Seewald left on his post. He was also talking about abortion. So you can see that these are two of the brightest stars of the future. And America has absolutely nothing to be afraid of looking forward, right, guys? The future is bright. Yep, these people did procreate, in case you were wondering. This next item comes from Gawker. It was heavily reported across their different platforms, and I have to stress this is a rumor. This is not something that has been confirmed. Certainly TLC has not confirmed this. The Duggars have not confirmed this. But this story was written by someone who claimed to be working on the show in 2008, which was then called 17 Kids and Counting. This is an account from a woman who claims she was there. She witnessed these events. I'm going to go ahead and have those read out, and we will come back and discuss that when we are done.
In 2008, I worked on the set of what was then known as 17 Kids and Counting, and I have something to tell you. During this time, the Duggars had very limited exposure to what they called the outside world, and so most of the crew members being from larger cities, we were all very surprised at how very little they knew or understood about places like New York, Los Angeles, and London. They didn't own a television or have an internet connection at that time, so really, next to secondhand church gossip, the local newspaper was their only link to anything outside Arkansas. The producers of the show had instructed crew members to not ever engage in conversation on our own with Jim, Bob, or Michelle in fears that we may either say something normal that they would find objectionable or that they would say something to where we'd react funny because we weren't used to their level of unworldliness, as I think it was put. We were constantly reminded that we were not to upset them or taint their version of the world, which is why they wanted limited conversation. Even a lighthearted conversation that might actually educate them about something they were horribly ignorant about was seen as tainting their view. It was very much like being told to not tell your little sister about Santa Claus. During the lead-up to their first family trip to New York to appear on the Today Show, Michelle started approaching some of us about New York and if it's scary for kids. Because she came to us, it was acceptable to entertain conversing with her, but producers would always rush over and monitor the conversation. That day we had a couple of crew members new to the set who were not familiar with the drill. Michelle had directed this question to four of us who all happened to be standing together. As tempting as it was to give some ridiculous answer, the producer's face reminded us to just be polite and give her the answer she wants. The follow-up question is when it went completely off the rails.
Well, I hear the city is overrun by gays. Has that been causing a lot of problems?
One of the new crew members laughed and said,
"Why don't you ask Jimmy?"
And then proceeds to yell over his shoulder,
"Hey, Jimmy? You giving the city lots of problems?"
Jimmy, as you can guess, was gay, but this fact was completely lost on the Duggars. She pulled the producer over to the corner and started yelling at him and demanding to know if what was just said was a joke and that she wants to see Jimmy. We're all watching this go down from a distance, dying inside at how funny this was and how shit is about to really hit a very big fan. The producer is now in a very tough position because Jimmy is a veteran of the industry and is excellent at what he does, but now the Duggars' weird, uncultured, Pollyanna worldview is threatening to disrupt the production staff. We could see the producer trying to calm her down and offering to have a talk with Jimmy, who we all thought was at a rig about 500 feet away, far enough out of earshot, when suddenly Jimmy appears. Michelle asked point blank, "So, you're gay?" The four of us are staring at this from a distance as if we're on the edge of our seats, completely shocked that someone in 2008 would even do that, and Jimmy suddenly strikes a pose like a model in a pin-up photo, and responds,
"Well, darling, it depends on who's asking."
Holy shit, the four of us watching were doubled over in pain laughing so hard at this. Well, when we returned, we found out that Jimmy was removed and transferred to another production, and that none of us are to breathe a word of what we saw to anyone. The official reason given to pacify the Duggars was that he was fired due to causing conflicts with the talent. Amazing how such a small sentence can contain so much hyperbole. The conflict was because he was gay. Of course, he wasn't really fired, but taken off this particular crew. Jimmy was super cool and took it all in stride, and understood the reasoning and the delicate balance the producers needed to have to please these stupid people. And the reason he never came forward or made a stink was because he was paid a bonus and moved to a more desirable production. The dramatics of the firing was inflated for the Duggars' benefit, stupid enough to believe that normal people from more progressive parts of America would support the removal of a gay person from a job filled with Union Democrats. Another secret they weren't aware of.
So again, I cannot confirm nor can I deny the reality of these claims. These could simply be rumors. However, there does seem to be a good amount of corroborating evidence that this is something that the Duggar family would be in favor of. They certainly are against homosexuality. They're certainly against what they consider alternative lifestyles from what the Bible tells them to do. So I'm going to say that this one is plausible in my opinion. Early in Michelle's marriage to Jim Bob, she had already had Josh, their first son, and at that time they were not so against birth control and were in favor of family planning, and Michelle went on the birth control pill. She had a miscarriage during that time period. Michelle has blamed the birth control pill for her miscarriage, and this is a misconception that her daughter Jill has also propagated on her YouTube channel.
Do you use birth control? Yes, we use birth control, but we prefer to use non-hormonal birth control methods. And just because we don't want to use anything that could potentially cause an abortion. And yeah, I think that there are probably uses for hormonal methods of birth control for like regulating things and stuff like that. But for us, like, we just want to be careful about that, and we're also like more natural minded, so I know like sometimes there can be more longer lasting effects from hormonal birth controls and stuff like that, so we just steer clear of those. And
I try not to get all out of whack, you know.
We want to have more kids and stuff, we're willing, so we don't want to like mess too much with all that and potentially cause problems.
We would probably stop using birth control whenever we wanted to get pregnant.
Yeah. So that's our answer to that.
The reason I think this is really important to mention is that there is absolutely no scientific basis for the idea that birth control causes miscarriages. Birth control pills actually prevent pregnancy. They prevent the egg from fertilizing. That is not to say that it is impossible that one might get pregnant while on the pill. There is, I think, about a 1% chance of that. And it sounds like perhaps Michelle was in that 1%, or perhaps she missed a day with her pill, or something went wrong with the timing there that she was unaware of. If this was just a private belief that Michelle and the Duggars held, I wouldn't mention it here on this iceberg. But the problem that I have with this is Michelle goes to church groups and groups with young Christian women, and she tells these women this story. She has told it so many times that some of her own children refuse to use birth control because they believe it could potentially cause miscarriages. I think this shows you how the dangerous belief system of the Duggars spread these misconceptions to a very wide and very impressionable audience. And we've talked about before, some of these people don't believe in science, they don't believe in evolution, so it's very easy to convince them of something extremely unscientific.